Hello and welcome back to the Cars.co.za YouTube channel. My name's Chery De Siena and I am in a brand new brand. See what I did there? It's not only a brand new car, it's a brand new badge as well. Well, it kind of is and it kind of isn't, because Proton used to sell cars in South Africa. They left in 2012 rather, and now they're back. But this is a very, very different Proton to the one that you might remember.
Dream, search, drive. Cars.co.za.
Get insurance that pays out faster than the word Archie. Budget, the official insurer of good South Africans.
So while they used to sell these little hatchbacks and they used to sell that little bakkie that's, what's it called? The Proton, was that like a little half tonner? Do you remember it? It was actually quite nice. But they've ditched all of that and they have gone for an almost exclusive SUV strategy. And so you now have two SUVs to choose from. This, the X50 and the larger X70. So what are they all about? Well, to put this car in context, it's a little bit smaller than a Haval Jolion. It's a little bit larger than, say, a Kia Seltos. But interestingly, it's not really priced amongst either of those cars. And let's get to the pricing in a little bit. Let me tell you a bit more about Proton and about this car that I'm driving. So Proton is now owned by Geely, which is a Chinese powerhouse. Geely owns all of Volvo. They also make their own cars. They've got brands such as Zeekr, which is a fully electric brand, which is doing really well in Europe as well. And they own 9% of Mercedes-Benz. So yeah, they're having a good decade, Geely. And they developed a bunch of platforms and a bunch of engines, which they built the Volvo XC40 on, and which they built this on as well. So sort of underneath me here is a Volvo. The engine is from a Volvo. It's a 1.5 litre 3-cylinder turbocharged petrol. You won't be able to get a diesel Proton. You can only have this engine in both the X50 and the X70. And I must say, the engine is a highlight of this package for me. Even though it's a 3-cylinder, it pulls really nicely. Power figures are 110 kilowatts, 226 Newton meters. Now, funnily enough, I'm in the second from the top of the range. If you buy the top of the range, they bump that power up by about 20%. But even without the power bump, I've actually been really impressed with this car. Now look, we are down at the coast, up at the reef. It might suffer a little bit, but because it's turbocharged, it won't suffer too much. So 110 kilowatts for me in a car this size is more than enough. I really like its mid-range torque delivery. It's slightly laggy, but nothing terrible, nothing bad. And once you get going and you get that lovely little sort of dollop of torque that comes through in the mid-range, it's a really impressive motor. Another thing that's really impressed me about this car is the quality of the ride. The quality of the experience in general actually is very, very high. It feels very well put together. The suppression of road noise and wind noise, the cabin is really quiet. So it feels like they've put quite a bit of money and time and expertise into cabin insulation, and I've been quite impressed by that. It's a nice car to cruise around the city and it's very relaxing. It's also put together in such a way that everything feels very solid. It sort of gives you the confidence that this is a product which is going to have good longevity and last a long time. And that's quite nice. That's always nice to feel in a brand new car from a manufacturer which we might not be familiar with. And so this Proton is off to a good start, in my opinion. However, it is entering a fiercely competitive market, which, let's be honest, has been turned upside down by new players from China. So it is very difficult to get into a car like this and not compare it to something like the Haval Jolion or the Chery Tiggo 7 Pro, which are pretty much direct rivals in terms of drivetrain, but both of those cars are actually larger than this car. It's a little bit more car for your money. And that's also where things start to get a bit complicated, because this car is priced quite far above all of those cars. So for instance, if you take the second from the top Jolion, that's about 120,000 Rand cheaper than this. In fact, you can get into a middle spec Haval H6, which is a significantly larger car, for similar money to this. So for this, the executive model of the X50, you are looking at 535,000 Rand. The top spec is about 580, and that means that you still don't get all the bells and whistles that Proton has to offer in this car that I'm currently driving right now. And yeah, when you go through the spec sheets of the Jolion and the Tiggo 7 Pro and you compare it to this car, it doesn't end favorably for this Proton X50. One of the big things that's missing, which I think a lot of people are very interested in, for instance, is the panoramic roof, which you're not going to find in here, unfortunately. And other nice tech, which is really nice to have, for instance, which you get in the Jolion, is adaptive cruise control. Now, when you start comparing this car to, say, more premium and more established rivals like, say, Kia, you can get a Kia Seltos, the very, very top spec 1.4. You can get that for about 20,000 Rand less than this car, and they are quite similarly spec'd and very, very similar in size as well. So Proton has a little bit of a dance to do here, because in just about every respect it's comparable to a Jolion or, say, a Tiggo 7 Pro, but in terms of price it's only really comparable to something like a Kia Seltos. And I think at the moment in South Africa that's a little bit of a difficult sell. I think many South Africans right now are looking for real value for their money, and in the ways that matter, a Jolion, even if you strip the spec out, just simply looks like more car for your money. But that being said, this is a better car, in my opinion, than the Haval Jolion. It feels a bit more premium. The quality of the materials for me is a little bit better. It feels a little bit more expensive, really. But are South Africans going to think that it's worth another 120,000 Rand to get into one of these? Right now I'm on the highway, 120 k's an hour. It's quite a windy day in Cape Town, and this car feels, in terms of ride quality and noise, it's not Volvo, but it's not far off, to be honest. So that sort of affordable luxury tagline that they're going for with the Proton, yeah, I can give them that. Very important factor, fuel consumption. Now, when I picked up the car, it was showing 10.2 liters to the 100 as the long-term average. So I reset it, and over the last 2 or 3 days that I've been driving the car, I have been driving quite conservatively. I want to give this car the best chance to show off its consumption. Now, they claim as low as 6.7 to the 100 for this car. I'm getting 8.7 currently, and it has been improving over time. I do think that in the city, this car is not particularly efficient, but out here on the highway, it is pretty decent. I would say probably in line with what you're getting from Chery and from Haval, but maybe a bit better than from Haval actually. But it's just been me in the car. So if you're planning to use this as a family car and you're going to be 4 or 5 up and lots of things in the boot, then I do expect the consumption will get a little bit worse. So consumption for me, middle of the road. Not really, not poor, but not excellent. The transmission for me is a highlight. It's a dual clutch auto with 7 speeds, and honestly, you never know when it's changing gear. It just does its thing. It's like there is no transmission, and it's way better than a CVT. So yeah, full marks for the gearbox. Welcome to the cabin of the Proton X50. Now, it's a little bit of a mixed bag in here, but overall, I would say the quality of the materials and the quality of the build in particular is relatively impressive in the segment. There's absolutely no rattles or squeaks to speak of, and in the right places you've got the right stuff. There's a nice leather trimmed dashboard up here. The plastics aren't as scratchy as you might expect. There's all actually fairly soft touch over there. This nice brushed aluminium effect. It's a fairly pleasant cabin. In terms of the interior space though, it doesn't feel sort of airy in here. It doesn't feel open and sort of capacious. It does feel a little tight, actually, weirdly enough. You do have a couple of nice little storage areas, a little bit down here with the USB port, your bins here, 2 drinks holders, and the door pockets are pretty useful. This screen over here is the bigger screen. If you went one model down, you would get a smaller screen than that. It's running an Android system, so it does have Android Auto, but at the moment it doesn't have CarPlay, although they will be offering an upgrade soon, and existing customers will be able to take the car to the dealership and get it upgraded. It feels like on the center screen in front of me that they did sort of cut corners a little bit, because only the middle bit is digital. The outside of it is actually sort of an LED panel, but it looks fairly good. It's definitely not the worst I've seen in the segment. One thing I must point out though that does feel quite cheap is the roof liner. It's actually a bit of a low light for me in the entire car, and it sort of feels a bit loose in places. I think that could have been a little bit better, and I'm sure you'll also notice that what is missing here is a nice big panoramic roof, which you'll get from rivals like the Tiggo 7 and the Jolion as well. And talking about rivals, I'd like to take you through the specs of some of this car's rivals to illustrate what this car does have and doesn't have. So using the very useful comparison tool on our site and on our app, I've gone through a couple of different cars, and the cars that I've chosen to use for this comparison are the Kia Seltos, the very, very top spec, the 1.4, which costs 511,000. And just out of interest, because it's a very similarly sized car but not similarly priced at all, I've gone for the second from the top spec Haval Jolion. Now that's 414,000 Rand list price. This car, 535,000 for the executive spec, so more than all of those, a good 120,000 Rand more than the Jolion. And let's walk through the specs together. Now, when it comes to engines, the Proton has a bit more power and torque than the other two. All cars have LED headlights and daytime running lights. All have 6 airbags, including curtain airbags. All have ABS, EBD, and ESC. At the moment, as I mentioned, the Proton doesn't have CarPlay, the others do. The Proton doesn't have electric folding mirrors, the others do. Only the Jolion of those 3 come with a panoramic sunroof. This Proton has 360 cameras, the others don't. All have keyless access, only the Jolion has auto wipers. None of them have blind spot warning, none of them have an electric tailgate. The Proton and the Jolion have artificial leather, the Kia has real leather. All have electric seats for the driver. And in terms of just physical size, the Proton and the Seltos are almost identical, whereas I mentioned the Jolion is a little bit larger. Now, the Haval Jolion is famous for having loads of driver assist systems in the top spec model, and that is a very affordable 449,000 Rand. If you want all those systems in this car with a panoramic sunroof, you have to upgrade to the premium spec, and that's 579,000 Rand. So they're missing a little bit here and they've got a little bit there, but again, to emphasize, the Jolion is a slightly larger car and you're looking at a saving of 120,000 Rand over this car that I'm sitting in right here. And yeah, for many South Africans, that might be a little bit of a difficult pill to swallow. This is actually some of the best artificial leather I've come across. It feels really good. That would fool me. Well, it fooled me. Would fool you as well, probably. Nice contrast stitching as well. It feels premium. It's a premium cabin, and what you can tell from, I mean, I'm sure you can see on camera how much legroom I've got there behind my driving position. What you can tell from this car is that it has been very cleverly packaged, because not actually a large car, but look how much headroom I have. That's actually pretty decent. And look how much knee room I have. It's very comfortable back here for adults and definitely for kids. It's also quite well appointed. You've got air vents, you've got 2 USB ports, electric windows all round. Of course, as I mentioned, the curtain airbags, that's a really nice safety feature. 2 drinks holders in here and a proper third seat belt. The boot is actually of a relatively impressive size, and that is again because of some impressive packaging that they've included in this car. Now, a couple of cars I've reviewed recently haven't had spare wheels at all, and I know that that bothers quite a lot of you. As South Africans, we do prefer to have spare tires. So this does have a little biscuit spare. It's underneath there, and I think it's all you really need in an emergency. And it also means that they've managed to save a lot of the boot floor height. So if we do our standard cooler box test, we will see that there's still quite a lot of distance, a lot of height between the cooler box and the parcel shelf, and that is quite nice. Now obviously the parcel shelf does come out, but you can still reach the seat release, and they fold 60/40. They also have ISOFIX child seat mounts. Cooperate! There we go. And you sort of get this flat-ish load area, which is quite useful. There's one more thing I want to show you at the back of the car here. Now let me show you something at the back here of the car, because even though this is a 1.5 3-cylinder turbo, you still get to join the 4-pipe gang. And not only that, your 4 pipes are real, none of that fake plastic stuff with a little pipe inside, and your 4 pipes are inset into this carbon fiber diffuser, and there's a KIF spoiler on the roof. So as I mentioned, 535 gets you this, the second from the top executive. Now you can get into a Proton X50 for 449, but interestingly, that is more expensive, 8,000 Rand more expensive than the very top spec Haval Jolion, just to give you an idea of how out of sync those two pricing ranges are. Wrapped up in the price of the Proton is some very decent cover. So you're looking at a 5-year unlimited warranty. Now that's a really good warranty. I mean, if you look at, say, a Mazda, that's only a 3-year unlimited, and the service plan is very healthy as well at 5-year, 80,000 kilometers. Now currently there are 25 dealerships across South Africa. They're aiming to have 35 by the middle of next year. And the brand is being brought into South Africa by the very large CMH group, and CMH have, gosh, the last time I counted, I think they have something like 12 brands under their umbrella. Funny enough, CMH also sell Havals. I mean, when we went to pick up this car, in one dealership you could have bought a Volvo or a Proton or a Haval. You could just walk between the three and just choose one, and then the same company takes your money at the end of the day. The South African car market's very entertaining. So there we go. I would love to know what you think of this new Proton in the comments below. Very, very keen to hear your thoughts. It's always exciting when there's a new brand on our road. So let us know what you think. And thanks very much for watching. If you haven't yet subscribed, give it some, give it some thought. I think it's a good idea, personally. Okay, bye. Thanks for watching. Now, did you know that Cars.co.za has a brilliant app? It's actually one of the most popular apps in South Africa, and that's because it's actually really bloody good to use. You can save your favorites. So while you're shopping, if you're taking a couple of weeks to shop, you just save your favorites so you don't lose them. And it's also a brilliant way of finding new car specs and pricing. It's incredibly detailed. I use it all the time. The link to the app is in the description below. You can get it on iOS and Android, and it's in the Huawei app gallery, I think it's called. Yes, that is what it's called. Cool, alrighty, and I'm done. Good? Okay.
God. All our Cilos and Archies deserve insurance that pays out.
Cars.co.za.